Alright, let's do a quick review of thesis statements just to make sure that we're all on the same page. As you can see here, I've got a couple of points about a thesis that everyone should know. The thesis statement is the main idea of your paper. It has to be a complete sentence. Sometimes it will be two sentences, that's not a problem. And it needs to be the last sentence or sentences of your first paragraph. And from the thesis statement, I should know the subject of your paper, I should know what you're going to argue, and I should know the main points that you're going to cover. Now, let's take a look at a couple of different thesis statements in action. Here I have an ENC 1101 paper up, and I have the thesis statement highlighted. Notice it's the last sentence of the first paragraph. And if you read it, you'll see that we can tell quite a bit about the paper from this one sentence. Although critics believe hunting is cruel and detrimental to game animals, it plays a very important role in population control, food chain and ecosystem balance, and wildlife conservation. Now notice from this single sentence, we know the subject of the paper is hunting. We know that he's going to argue that hunting is important, and he's going to talk about population control, food chain and ecosystem balance, and wildlife conservation. Now, this thesis also sets out a plan for the entire paper. Notice the first thing he mentions in his thesis is that some people oppose hunting. And indeed, the first paragraph is all about those who oppose it. He also tells us he's going to talk about population control. And the very next paragraph is about population control. He moves on to tell us that he's going to talk about ecosystem and food chain balance. And indeed, he does that down here. Take a look. He moves over to food chain and ecosystem balance. And this thesis tells us that he's going to wrap up by talking about wildlife conservation. And if you read this final paragraph here, you will see that indeed he does wrap up his body by talking about how hunting helps wildlife conservation. And he then tacks a thoughtful conclusion onto the end of the paper. Alright, so that's an ENC 1101 paper. Since this is 1102, we're actually writing about literature, and I have a couple of those papers up right now. So let's take a look at the thesis statement in a literary analysis paper, and I think you'll see that it pretty much does the same thing. So here's a paper that I found online about Shakespeare's Hamlet, and here's the URL if you want to look at it on your own. But let's just talk right about the thesis statement. Notice the first paragraph, we jump to the end here, and it looks like the thesis is mostly made up of two statements, and they kind of work together. But again, they're the end of the first paragraph, and if we read it, we can tell quite a bit about this paper. The character Hamlet from Shakespeare's tragedy Hamlet explores these existential questions, seeking truth and understanding as he tries to come to grips with his father's death. In the end, Hamlet proves to be an exceedingly existential character. And if you read this paper, you'll see that the entire paper, all of it, is about how Hamlet is an existential character coming to grips with his father's death. And if you skim through this, you will see that, sure enough, the words existential pop up over and over again because this paper is a reflection of its thesis. So, I encourage you to go to this URL and read this paper and take note of how pretty much every single sentence works to back up and prove this thesis. Let's take a look at another literary analysis paper. Now, this one here on the practices of Dr. Rank from the play The Dollhouse by Ibsen has a really good thesis statement. Notice this here, I've highlighted, it's the last sentence of the first paragraph. Dr. Rank's function in the play is to foreshadow, symbolize, and reflect upon the truth of life and society and to break down the barrier between appearance and reality. What a great thesis. And it names the subject, right? Dr. Rank. This whole paper is about the character Dr. Rank and what he does in the play. Now, notice that we know what the student is going to argue. That the whole reason this character exists, right, is to break down the barrier between appearance and reality. And where is this paper headed? Well, the student will cover the use of foreshadowing, the use of symbol, and the use of reflection. And if you read this paper, you will see, indeed, look at the keywords pop up. The thesis is a guide to the entire paper. Notice foreshadow. It's one of our first points in our thesis. The next point is symbol. And the next paragraph is about symbol. And then we have reflection down here. So here's the URL. You can actually track this paper down yourself and read it. The key thing to remember is that the thesis is the main idea of the paper. It names what you're going to talk about, tells us what you're going to argue, and previews where the paper is headed. So keep this in mind when you write the thesis for the papers in my class. If you have any questions, use the Communicate tab at the top of our Angel course page. All right, I wish you the best of luck.